Hey guys, tonight we stumble straight into the kind of story that curls itself around your shoulders like a cold, wet coat. Imagine, it's past midnight, the streets are slick with rain, and the glow of the street lamps makes puddles look like molten copper. You're barely awake, halfway wrapped in a blanket burrito, when the phone rings. Of course it does, 'cause murder doesn't wait for civilized hours. And you're about to trade your pillow for police tape. You probably won't survive this kind of schedule, but hey, at least it's not accounting. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how wide awake or deliriously sleepy everyone else is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The call comes from a detective who sounds like he's been chewing gravel. He doesn't waste time. We've got one. Downtown. Bring your notebook. That's all. You slip into shoes, still damp from yesterday's weather, tug on a jacket, and head into the misty city night. The rain has a rhythm, a soft percussion against trash can lids and dented car roofs. You know that sound will be tied forever to this case. When you arrive, the street is blocked by yellow tape, fluttering like a nervous flag. The crowd is thin, mostly night shift wanderers, and the kind of insomniacs who thrive on drama. Their breath fogs in the air, hanging like speech bubbles never filled in. At the center, under the harsh white glow of a portable floodlight, lies the first body. It's a man in his late 30s, though rain has blurred the finer details. His suit jacket is rumpled, one sleeve torn, the buttons cracked. A black umbrella lies a few feet away, snapped like a broken limb. A cigarette, unsmoked, has stuck to the wet pavement beside his hand. He looks like he simply lay down to rest, but the stillness is too perfect, the silence too loud. One officer mutters, "He's been here maybe an hour." Another corrects, "Closer to 2. Rigors already setting in." Historians still argue whether medieval constables really rang bells and shouted murder through cobbled streets, but the principle is the same. Someone always has to announce death before it becomes real. Tonight, you're that someone. You crouch low, the rain seeping through your knees, and start cataloging the scene. The first thing that jumps out, a pocket watch, smashed. Its glass face has spiderweb cracks, the minute hand frozen at 12:47. A clue, or just unlucky timing. Forensic folks will argue, but you already know the universe doesn't do coincidences, at least not in stories like this. As you lean closer, you notice muddy footprints, not belonging to the victim. They trail off toward an alley, where the shadows gulp down the lamplight. The prints are uneven, hurried, as though whoever left them couldn't decide whether to flee or double back. You trace them with your eyes, filing away the pattern in that mental cabinet where you keep mysteries and leftover grocery lists. Someone clears their throat behind you. It's Detective Harlan, the gravel-voiced caller. He offers you a grim nod. "Not random," he says. He doesn't need to explain further. You can see it in his expression. Too many little signs, the torn sleeve, the frozen watch, the footprints leading away. Random violence is messy, but this feels orchestrated, like sheet music only one person can hear. The victim's wallet is intact, cash folded neatly, cards untouched. That rules out a mugging. Instead, tucked in the inner pocket of the jacket, you find a small, water-stained notebook. Its cover is leather, worn to softness by years of handling. The first few pages are filled with lists, names, dates, short phrases in a shorthand you can't quite parse. One line catches your eye. Meet corner of 7th. You are, coincidentally, standing on the corner of 7th. Not creepy at all. The rain eases for a moment, leaving the city slick and reflective. Street lamps shimmer in puddles like coins tossed into fountains, but nobody's making wishes tonight. A whisper runs through the crowd. Is it him? Was it planned? The kind of rumor that spreads before facts can catch up. You pause to absorb the atmosphere, the wet stone smell, the distant honk of a cab, the metallic temps of rain on steel gutters. Every case has a soundtrack, and this one feels like it's scored 4 strings, tense, plucked, waiting to resolve. History offers strange echoes. You remember reading about the Bow Street Runners, London's first organized police force back in the 1700s, racing through dark alleys with lanterns. Their work was as much theater as justice an ounce presence. Calm the public, collect whispers. Tonight, you feel like one of them, except with less candle wax and more soggy sneakers. A stranger at the tape tries to push closer, insisting they know the guy. The officers shove them back gently but firmly. You catch a glimpse, thin, pale, eyes darting like a cornered rabbit. Could be nothing, or it could be the first loose thread in a sweater, begging to be unraveled. Your notebook fills with sketches, times, descriptions. The body is finally lifted, carefully, into a waiting van. The crowd disperses slowly, like fog breaking apart in the wind. But you remain, staring at that empty square of pavement where the man once was, as though the wet ground itself might whisper something more. A memory surfaces, the quirky tidbit of ancient Egyptians using crocodile dung as sunscreen. Weird, yes, but relevant, because just like those ancient rituals, this crime scene holds rituals of its own. The placement of objects, the frozen watch, the intact wallet, none of it random, all of it meant to signal, like hieroglyphs written in rain. Harlan claps you on the shoulder. Go home, get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. You nod, but you know sleep will be as impossible as a square circle. Cases like this seep into your mind, into the wallpaper of your thoughts. You'll lie awake, listening to the patter of rain, replaying the sight of that shattered watch face over and over, wondering who wanted it broken and why. You step back under your umbrella. The city's neon glow, painting the wet streets in bruised purples and greens. Somewhere out there, the person who did this is also walking home, maybe watching you from a distance. The thought lingers like a shadow that doesn't belong to you. The night feels heavier now, as if the whole city took a breath and hasn't exhaled yet. And you're caught at the center, already tangled in a mystery you didn't ask for but can't resist solving. The rain doesn't stop by mourning, it just changes its mind and becomes a fine mist, that clingy kind that sticks to your hair and fogs your glasses. You're back on 7th Street, standing under a lamppost that looks like it hasn't been polished since disco was fashionable. The crime scene tape is gone, the body is gone, the crowd is gone, the crowd is gone, but the story hasn't budged. The street is quieter now, like it's holding its breath, daring you to find what the floodlights and uniforms missed. You kneel beside the curb where the pocket watch had been lying. The imprint remains faint, but there, like a bruise on the pavement. Funny how objects leave ghosts behind even after they're bagged as evidence. You trace the outline with your finger, the way you might draw in condensation on a window. You know this case won't solve itself. It's going to whisper, tease, demand. Your eyes move to the footprints. Yesterday, they led away into the alley. Today, most have blurred into muddy smudges, but a few remain crisp, pressed deep into the grime, showing the shape of a worn sole. Size 10, maybe. That doesn't sound like much, but you know it will matter later. You always do. The alley still feels wrong. It's narrow, stacked with leaning trash bins, and smells like old cabbage mixed with yesterday's pizza. A stray cat darts away, its tail flicking like it knows something you don't, and maybe it does. You follow the prints until they disappear near a set of wet cardboard boxes. One box is torn, revealing a sliver of red fabric inside. You tug it, it's part of a scarf, frayed at the edges, smelling faintly of cheap perfume and rain. You slip it into a bag just as your phone buzzes. It's Harlan. Forensics want you down at the lab. They found something. His voice is gruff, but carries that faint, electric hum of discovery. You sigh, brushing mist off your jacket, and head back into the city. The lab is in a basement with flickering fluorescent lights, the kind that hum just enough to drive you slowly insane. A technician in a coffee-stained lab coat waves you over. On the counter sits the victim's leather notebook, opened to a new page you hadn't seen before. In neat, slanted handwriting are the words, "Tell her I kept my promise." No name, no signature, just that single line. The tech shrugs. No prints except his own. Ink's fresh, though. Written maybe an hour before death. You feel the weight of it. Tell who, keep what promise. Mysteries always arrive in pairs, like bad roommates who refuse to move out. You sit for a moment, listening to the hum of the lights. Your mind drifts back to a mainstream historical fact you once read. In ancient Rome, detectives didn't exist. Crimes were solved or ignored by whoever had enough influence to push for justice. Imagine that. If you wanted your murderer caught, you'd better have friends in the Senate. Otherwise, tough luck. A strangely comforting thought, given your current situation. At least you're not living in a toga with zero forensic support. Back at the station, Harlan flips through his notes. No ID on the scarf. The watch isn't registered, but the cigarette. He slides a photo across the desk. The cigarette you saw on the pavement. Imported. Russian brand. Hard to get around here. Someone went out of their way. He smirks. Either our killers got expensive taste, or they're trying too hard to look exotic. You can't help but chuckle. Maybe they just hate local tobacco. The joke lands flat, but in rooms like this, humor feels like oxygen. The investigation slows, then speeds, like a broken metronome. You wander through the victim's apartment, a tidy place, with just enough personality to feel lived in. On his bookshelf, classics, detective novels, and a strange, self-published volume about ley lines and city energy fields. You raise an eyebrow. Not your typical coffee table read. Tucked between pages, you find a pressed flower, brittle and gray with age. Weird detail, but you pocket it. Cases are often solved by the crumbs nobody else bothers to sweep. There's a quirky tidbit floating in your head, too. Victorians once believed you could photograph a person's last image burned into their eyes at the moment of death. They even experimented with scraping retinas to capture these supposed ghostly snapshots. It never worked, obviously, but it shows how desperately people want objects to confess secrets. Looking at that flower, you wonder if it's the same something carrying a memory only the right lens could unlock. On your way out, A neighbor corners you in the hall. He was quiet, she says, didn't talk much, but last week I heard him arguing on the phone, sounded heated. He kept saying, "I told you I wouldn't break it," over and over. Her voice drops. You think it was about a woman. You shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra ended her life by snakebite or poison-laced ointment, but either weight was love and betrayal mixed with power that sealed her fate. In the same way, you can't help wondering if promises and lovers are the true bones under this case's skin. The day folds into evening. You find yourself retracing the path from the lamplight crime scene to the shadowy alley, scarf in hand, notebook under arm. The city feels more alive at night, as though it leans closer when secrets are afoot. Every flickering neon sign, every squeak of wet shoes, every muttered argument outside a bar, they all feel like parts of the same puzzle. And yet, despite all these scraps, the picture isn't clear. You've got a broken watch, a Russian cigarette, a leather notebook with cryptic promises, and a scarf that smells like perfume. It's not much, but it's enough to keep you awake again tonight. You know the killer wanted to leave you something: breadcrumbs, taunts, maybe both. The problem is figuring out which are real clues and which are just noise. As you pass under another lamppost, you glance at your reflection in a rain puddle. The water ripples, blurring your face, bending the neon glow into strange symbols. You almost laugh. If this were ancient Mesopotamia, you'd be calling in a priest to read omens from sheep livers instead of analyzing footprints in the mud. Progress, right? Though you're still basically squinting at signs and hoping they add up. The scarf flutters in your bag as if it wants to escape. The notebook waits like a trap you can't quite spring. And somewhere out there, someone is waiting, watching, to see if you catch on before they decide to move again. You pull your jacket tighter, step into the mist, and let the city swallow you whole. The diner smells like scorched coffee and fried onions, which is to say, like every diner at every ungodly hour. You slide into a cracked red vinyl booth, notebook ready, while the ceiling fan above you turns with a lazy squeak. The suspects, or maybe just people unlucky enough to know the victim, trickle in one by one. Each looks like they've rehearsed their lines in a mirror and still manage to forget the second act. The first is Clara, the neighbor who heard that heated phone call. She stirs her tea with a shaky hand, rattling the spoon like it's sending Morse code. "I barely knew him," she insists, "but he always looked tired, like he carried something heavy, you know?" You nod. You know that look. It's the same one Harlan wears when paperwork stacks higher than his patience. Clara leans closer. "He asked me once if I believed in debts that don't go away." She shrugs. "I thought he meant money, but maybe not." You jot it down, trying not to smirk. People always say they barely knew someone right before they spill enough details to write a biography. It's like how every documentary interview starts with "I don't know much," and then boom, 2 hours later, you've solved the Cold War. Next comes a man named Victor. He works with the victim, or so he says, though his resume could use proofreading. His suit is too sharp for the hour, and his cologne arrives before he does. He orders black coffee, doesn't touch it, and spends more time staring at the waitress than at you. "We had no issues," he insists, which is always code for "we had at least 3 issues." He fiddles with his cufflinks. He was secretive, always scribbling in that little book of his. I figured he was writing bad poetry. He chuckles, but his eyes don't. You push the cigarette photo across the table. Victor glances at it, shrugs. Not his brand. He smoked menthols, cheap ones. That detail lands with a thud, because you know the Russian cigarette was at the crime scene. And if Victor's telling the truth, it didn't belong to the victim. A breadcrumb, maybe. Or maybe Victor just enjoys sounding useful. While you scribble, a thought sneaks in, a mainstream historical fact you remember. In 1892, Argentina recorded the first conviction based on fingerprint evidence. Before that, people relied on shaky eyewitness accounts. Imagine trying to solve a murder back then. Half the city probably looked like the guy. You glance at Victor again. Maybe history hasn't changed as much as we like to brag. By the time the third suspect arrives, the diner's clock blinks 1:30 a.m. Her name is Eliza, a secretary who worked in the same office building as the victim. She looks exhausted, mascara smudged into delicate bruises under her eyes. She keeps glancing at the door, as though she expects someone to barge in mid-conversation. He was kind, she whispers. Too kind. He lent money, helped with errands. People took advantage of him. She hesitates, then adds, but sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he'd tear pages out of that notebook and burn them. You raise an eyebrow. That's new. What kind of pages? Lists, she says. Just lists of names. But he destroyed them like they were dangerous. Your pen pauses mid-word. Burning lists, secret promises, Russian cigarettes. This man lived a double life, or maybe a triple. And Eliza, she looks like she's deciding whether to tell you the truth or the version that keeps her breathing easy at night. A quirky tidbit surfaces while you sit there. Medieval courts sometimes used animals as witnesses. Yes, really. A pig could be tried for theft, or a goat for trespassing. It was nonsense, of course. But it shows how badly humans want to point the finger even at creatures who can't defend themselves. Looking at these suspects, you realize people haven't changed much. Everyone wants to shift the blame, sometimes even onto shadows. Eliza fidgets with her napkin. He asked me once, she says softly, if I believed in curses. You resist the urge to laugh. It would break the spell. Instead, you scribble it down, adding another loop to the tangled web in your notebook. Promises, debts, curses. You feel like you're one bad dream away from starring in a gothic novel. As dawn hints at the windows, the diner empties. Victor leaves first, muttering about early meetings. Clara excuses herself with a nervous smile. Eliza lingers a moment longer, sipping her cold coffee like it's a shield. When she finally leaves, she drops something on the table by accident, a receipt. Not just any receipt, though it's for a pack of Russian cigarettes. You stare at it, the way you'd stare at a magician pulling a rabbit from a hat. Coincidence, a setup, or just sloppy timing. The waitress clears plates with a clatter, and you slip the receipt into your notebook. Outside, the sky is the color of steel wool. You breathe in the damp air, replaying their words. Everyone's trying to look innocent, but someone's acting just a little too rehearsed. Historians still argue whether Shakespeare wrote all the plays attributed to him. Maybe it was a group effort. Maybe it was one guy with phenomenal insomnia. Either way, it's proof that multiple voices can hide behind one mask. You're starting to wonder if this case is the same. One killer or a chorus of hands pushing the same piece across the board. You head back to the street where it all began, your notebook heavier than it should be. The lamplight flickers, as though reminding you it was here first. The scarf, the notebook, the cigarette, the broken watch, they're all stories waiting for the right voice to tell them. And every interview tonight added a verse to the song. The city exhales steam from manhole covers, taxis groan by, and the first bakery of the morning releases the warm scent of bread into the mist. You're tired, sure, but not done, never done, because now the case isn't just about the victim. It's about every lie and every truth tangled together, like wires sparking in the rain. And you've promised yourself you won't sleep until you've untangled them all. The library is not the grand marble temple you imagine in novels. It's a squat brick building wedged between a laundromat and a discount shoe store. Inside, the air is thick with dust and faintly sweet, like old paper steeped in tea. The overhead lights buzz, and the carpet muffles your steps so completely it feels like walking through memory foam. You don't come here for comfort. You come here because sometimes the city hides its darkest secrets between dewy decimals. The archivist greets you with a smile that could double as a warning. Her glasses magnify her eyes, and her cardigan has enough cat hair to start a second cat. She doesn't ask why you're here, she already knows. Everyone's buzzing about the murder. She simply says, "Follow me," and leads you to the basement. Down there, the smell intensifies. Paper, mold, something faintly metallic. Rows of cabinets stretch like soldiers, each drawer labeled in careful, fading handwriting. She slides one open, and inside are folders older than you, their corners frayed, their clips rusted. "Your man's name popped up before," she whispers, tapping a file with one long nail. You pull it out and sit at a warped wooden desk. Inside are letters, copies of correspondence between the victim and someone only identified as E. The handwriting matches the notebook's slanted style. The earliest letter dates back 5 years. They're brief, cryptic, full of unfinished sentences. Met as promised. Can't say more in writing. Another reads, "If they find out, we both burn." Your stomach knots. These aren't grocery lists or poetry fragments. These are warnings carved into paper. And then you find something stranger, a half-burned map, edges curled and blackened, taped into the back of a folder. The map outlines sections of the city, with certain intersections marked in red ink, one of them, 7th Street. The archivist peers over your shoulder. Funny, isn't it? Some people think the city has lines of power, like veins under the skin. She smiles faintly. Others say that's nonsense. You nod, but her words linger. Mainstream history fact. In ancient Greece, Herodotus described how cities were often planned, with temples aligned to constellations. Historians still argue whether it was spiritual design or just practical geometry. But either way, it meant people saw patterns where others just saw rocks and streets. Looking at this burned map, you wonder which kind of pattern you're staring at now. You copy the markings into your notebook. The archivist, satisfied, drifts away to her desk like a ghost returning to its haunt. Alone, you flip through more files. The victim's name appears in reports connected to a financial scandal, missing funds, shady transfers, the sort of bureaucratic mess designed to bore detectives into giving up. But one receipt catches your eye, a withdrawal slip dated the same day as his death. The amount, just enough to buy silence or loyalty. You lean back in the creaking chair. Someone's been playing chess in the shadows, moving pieces across both banks and alleys. And the victim, he wasn't just a pawn, he might have been a knight who strayed too close to the wrong side of the board. You pocket your notes and head upstairs. The archivist stops you, adjusting her glasses. "Be careful," she says, her voice oddly soft. "People who chase old secrets sometimes get buried with them." You want to laugh it off, but the way she says it makes the hair on your arms rise. Outside, the city is bright with afternoon sun, but it doesn't feel warmer. The map in your pocket feels hot, alive, like it wants to jump out and redraw itself. You walk along streets you've known your whole life, but suddenly every corner feels loaded with meaning. Is that lamppost just a lamppost, or part of some hidden design? You stop at one of the red-marked intersections. Nothing unusual. A bakery, a barber, a newsstand with yesterday's papers. But as you watch, you notice two men leaning against a car, not talking, not moving, just watching. Their eyes slide away when yours meet theirs, but too late. They're sentinels. And if this map is right, they're guarding something. You duck into the bakery, order a roll you don't want, and pretend to study the pastries while peeking out the window. The men stay planted. You jot their license plate down on a napkin, along with one word, WHY. Here's a quirky tidbit to chew on with your unwanted bread. In the 19th century, librarians sometimes chained rare books to the shelves to stop people from stealing them. Picture rows of precious volumes, literally shackled like prisoners. Strange, yes, but standing here with a burned map in your pocket, you suddenly understand the impulse. Knowledge isn't just power, it's contraband. The evening drapes itself across the city. You retreat to your apartment, lay the map on the table, and connect the dots with trembling pen strokes. The intersections form something like a spiral, curling inward. At the center, a building you've passed 100 times, a crumbling theater that hasn't shown a film in years. Historians still argue whether the Voynich manuscript filled with bizarre drawings and undeciphered text was a genuine code or an elaborate prank. You feel the same staring at this spiral. Was the victim mapping real danger or doodling in paranoia? You won't know until you step inside that theater. You fold the map, slip it into the notebook, and sit back. The city hums outside your window, restless, whispering through neon signs and rattling radiators. And you're caught between pages of history, half archivist, half detective, trying to decide whether you're unraveling someone else's obsession or stepping straight into it. The scarf, the cigarette, the notebook, the letters, the burned map, they're starting to hum together, like strings tuning for the same song. And you can't help but think, the performance hasn't even begun yet. The city at night wears neon-like war paint. Signs buzz and flicker, half-lit letters advertising diners, pawn shops, and promises nobody intends to keep. You walk beneath them, the map folded in your pocket, and feel like the whole place is leaning in to watch. Some cities sprawl lazily, but this one curls round you, pressing its alleys against your ribs, whispering, "Pay attention." You stop at an intersection marked on the burned map. It looks ordinary enough, just a row of shuttered storefronts and a streetlight that blinks as though it's trying to send Morse code. But you feel it anyway, the weight of eyes. You're not paranoid. You're practiced. Every step echoes too loudly. Every shadow lingers a second too long. Across the street, a man in a wool cap pretends to read a newspaper. The only problem, it's upside down, smooth. He folds it when you glance his way and strolls off, but the performance leaves you grinning. You've seen more convincing improv at middle school talent shows. Further down, you find a rooftop with a perfect view of the square. The fire escape groans under your weight, but you climb anyway, heart thudding against your ribs, like a drummer who hasn't learned subtlety. At the top, the city spreads out like a circuit board, lights glowing, wires humming, streets buzzing with unseen current. You settle against the brick, notebook open, pen poised. From above, the watchers are easier to spot. One leans against a lamppost, another paces in front of a bodega, checking his watch every 30 seconds. They're not together, but they're not strangers either. They orbit the same secret. You jot down positions, times, gestures. Your handwriting grows cramped in the dim light, but the rhythm feels familiar, almost comforting. It reminds you of a mainstream historical fact. In 15th century Florence, the Medici family paid artists and spies in equal measure, both tasked with observing patterns. Painters sketched faces, spies sketched movements. You wonder which role you're playing now, perched on this roofer, ist or spy. A sound cuts through your thoughts, laughter. It drifts up from the alley below, sharp and quick. You peer over the edge. Two kids chase each other, spraying water from cracked soda bottles, their joy cutting briefly through the city's tension. For a moment, you let the sound soften you. Then they vanish, and the watchers remain. Back on the street, you trail one of them, the smoker. He moves casually, but his eyes flick in every reflective surface, shop windows, car mirrors, even puddles. He knows he's being followed, but not by whom. You slow your pace, pretending to admire graffiti splashed across a brick wall. The design catches your attention, a spiral, almost identical to the one on the victim's burned map. Quirky tidbit: during the Cold War, some East Berlin walls were rumored to be painted with chemicals that glowed faintly under ultraviolet light, meant to expose hidden markings. Nobody proved it, but it shows how paranoia breeds creativity. You can't help but wonder if this spiral graffiti is the same warning or signal. The smoker disappears into a club lit by a stuttering neon sign. You don't follow, not yet. Instead, you stand outside, listening to the bass thump through the walls, feeling the vibration in your chest. You know better than to storm in blind. You'll wait. A figure joins you unexpectedly, Harlan, trench coat collar turned up against the drizzle. You're stubborn, he mutters. His eyes track the club door. He's one of ours. One of ours. Informant, or at least he was. Harlan shrugs, rain dripping from his fedora like punctuation marks. Hard to tell anymore who's working for who. That lands heavy. If the watchers are informants, then the spiral isn't just paranoia. It's a code, a signal bouncing between factions you barely understand. You're not just chasing a killer, you're circling a web that might stretch higher than you thought. Historians still argue whether the fall of the Roman Empire was caused by barbarian invasions, economic collapse, or slow internal rot. You think about that as you watch the smoker re-emerge from the club, slipping something into another man's hand. Empires fall for many reasons, but always because someone was watching and waiting. You and Harlan trail him silently until he vanishes into the subway. The roar of trains swallows his footsteps, leaving you both staring at the graffiti spiral again. This city's got too many secrets, Harlan says, lighting his own cigarette. He offers you one, you decline. You laugh softly. Too many secrets, or not enough light. The rain thickens, plastering your hair to your forehead, blurring the neon into watercolor smears. You close your notebook and tuck it away. You know the city isn't just watching. It's testing you, pushing you into alleys, onto rooftops, into diners, daring you to keep up. The scarf, the notebook, the burned map, they're all threads. Tonight, you've found the loom. They're tied to a theater at the spiral's center, guarded by men who can't quite hide. A city buzzing with watchers who seem less human than shadows. And you, caught in the middle, blinking rain from your eyes, wondering if maybe the city itself is the real suspect. You head home past midnight, shoes soaked, coat heavy, notebook bursting with half answers. Above you, another figure leans from a rooftop, unseen but certain. The city doesn't sleep, and neither will you. Morning creeps in reluctantly, painting the sky a pale, bruised gray. And you're back at the desk, map unfolded, notebook flopped open like a tired dog. Your handwriting looks like it was done during a small earthquake, but the shapes are there. Spirals, intersections, arrows pointing nowhere. You tap the pen against your teeth, staring at the mess until the dots start winking back at you. Patterns, always patterns. You draw lines between the marked intersections. They overlap, loop, cross back over one another. At first it's nonsense, but then, slowly, you see it, a constellation, not stars, but streets. The pattern resembles an eye, wide open, staring straight at you. It's the kind of detail that makes your spine itch. The victim wasn't just doodling, he was mapping something deliberate. You check your notes, scarf with perfume, Russian cigarettes, burned map, cryptic notebook entries, witnesses with shaky alibis. The scattered bits don't want to sit still, but you can feel them nudging closer, like magnets. A knock at your door interrupts. Harlan shuffles in, balancing 2 coffees. He drops one in front of you and grumbles, couldn't sleep either. His tie is crooked, his eyes bloodshot, but the man looks alive in a way he didn't yesterday. Forensics came back. Those footprints from the alley, they weren't just random. 2 sets overlaps, someone was following the victim before he died. That pulls the threads tighter. You imagine it, one man walking, another shadow tailing him. The watch breaks, the cigarette drops, the scarf tears. A choreography of death. It reminds you of a mainstream historical fact. In 1888, the police in London famously received letters, supposedly from Jack the Ripper, taunting them with clues. Historians still argue whether those letters were genuine or hoaxes. Either way, they were part of a pattern, a killer weaving narrative into crime. Looking at your case, you wonder, is the notebook a diary, or is it a taunt meant for you? You spread out the evidence on the table, arranging each item like tarot cards. The scarf flutters, as if in a breeze that isn't there. The broken watch ticks faintly in your imagination, though it hasn't moved since the night of the murder. The notebook glares at you from its water-stained cover and the burned map. It sits smugly, daring you to trace the spiral again. Harlan studies you. You're seeing something, aren't you? Connections, you murmur. Everything loops back. It's not random. He chuckles, without humor. Nothing ever is. The phone buzzes. Eliza's name flashes across the screen. You hesitate, then answer. Her voice trembles. I think I know what he meant by promises. Meet me, but not at my place. It's not safe. The line goes dead before you can ask where. A minute later, a text arrives with an address, an abandoned office near the river. You exchange a glance with Harlan. He shrugs. Could be a trap, could be nothing. Quirky tidbit time. In the Middle Ages, people believed the mandrake plant screamed when uprooted, and if you heard it, you'd drop dead instantly. To harvest it safely, they tied dogs to the plant so the dogs would pull it free and supposedly die in the process. Ridiculous, yes, but it's a reminder that sometimes chasing answers gets you killed. You can't help but feel a little like that dog as you pocket your notes. The office building creaks like an old ship when you enter. Broken blinds sway in the draft, casting slats of dusty light across the floor. Eliza waits in the far corner, arms wrapped tight around herself. She looks smaller than before, like the city's been shrinking her 1 hour at a time. He promised he wouldn't give them up, she blurts, before you even speak. The names in the notebook, they weren't random. They're people tied to the scandal at his company. He was supposed to protect them, but someone wanted him to break that promise. You step closer, lowering your voice. Who? She shakes her head. I don't know. But he said if anything happened to him, the map would explain why. The map again. You unfold it, right there, the spiral glaring in the dim light. Eliza points to the center, the crumbling theater. That's where they met. Not once, but over and over. Deals, trades, secrets. He told me if I ever felt watched, I should avoid it. Which is ironic, since you've spent the past 2 nights orbiting it like a moth. Harlan mutters. Figures. Every city's got one place where shadows get thicker. Before you can respond, a crash echoes from the stairwell. Heavy boots on old wood. You shove the map into your jacket and signal Eliza to stay quiet. But the intruders don't enter. They pause outside, whisper something you can't catch, then retreat. You exhale slowly, but the message is clear. Someone knows you're sniffing too close. Back in your apartment, the pieces swirl. The victim promised protection. He kept lists. He burned them when they became too dangerous. But someone may be Victor. Maybe someone higher wanted those promises broken. The watch stopped at 12:47, marking the moment loyalty ran out. Historians still argue whether the Trojan horse was a real event or just clever metaphor. Either way, it was a symbol of betrayal smuggled inside trust. You can't help but think the victim carried his own Trojan horse, his notebook, filled with secrets that betrayed him in the end. You redraw the spiral on a fresh sheet of paper, connect names to locations, and finally admit what you've been resisting. The killer isn't just one step ahead. They've been arranging the stage, piece by piece, and you've only just realized you're standing in the wings. The scarf, the cigarette, the burned map, the notebook, they're no longer random artifacts. They're rehearsed props. A performance is unfolding, and you're not the audience. You're part of the cast. And somewhere, the director, your killer, waits for the curtain to rise. The raid comes just before dawn, that hour when the city feels most brittle, like the whole place might crack if someone sneezes too hard. You're still half asleep when Harlan pounds on your door, muttering something about "we've got him." Finally, you grab your coat, shoes unlaced, notebook tucked under your arm, and follow the rattle of his car down streets still wet from last night's rain. The squad swarms an old boarding house. The landlord's yelling about permits. Dogs bark 2 floors over, and a woman in a nightgown smokes on the stoop as if midnight raids are Tuesday specials. Inside, you find Victor, the silk-haired, unflappable executive, pinned to the floor with cuffs snapping shut around his wrists. He doesn't struggle, he doesn't shout, he just looks at you, calm as a man waiting for a cab. "Took you long enough," he says. And in that moment, you hate him. They haul him in for questioning, and you sit across from him in the cramped interview room, fluorescent light buzzing like a lazy wasp. Harlan paces in the corner, chewing his lip raw. You flip open your notes, list the evidence, and watch Victor's face like a hawk. You followed him, you cornered him, You left him to bleed. Victor sighs. That's your theory. Cute, but wrong. You slam the notebook closed for effect. The sound echoes sharp enough to make Harlan stop pacing. Then tell me why your cigarette brand was at the scene. Victor leans forward, wrists chained, eyes glittering. Because I was there. Sure, I met him that night, but I didn't kill him. I tried to warn him. You want to laugh, but the calm in his voice gnaws at you. He's too certain, too composed. Either he's innocent, or he's the best liar you've ever met. Mainstream historical fact break. In 1935, Bruno Hauptmann was executed for the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. But for decades, historians still argue whether he acted alone, or if he was a scapegoat covering for a larger network. Wrong suspect, wrong story, maybe even wrong villain. You can't help but feel echoes of that same uncertainty here, sitting across from Victor. Harlan leans on the table. You expect us to believe you were playing guardian angel? Victor smirks. Believe what you want, but I wasn't the only one following him. The words hang heavy. You remember the overlapping footprints from the alley, the whispers outside the abandoned office. He's right, there was more than one shadow that night. Still, the case file bulges with damning details. Perfume fibers traced to Victor's office. Burned maps retrieved from a bin near his property. A witness swearing they saw his car by the river. It's too neat, and you know neat cases are like neat apartments staged for guests, hiding the mess in closets. Quirky tidbit. In the 18th century, some towns hired sinners. These were people paid to eat bread placed on a corpse, symbolically absorbing the deceased's sins, so the soul could pass on lighter. Talk about a bad gig. Victor feels like that now, chewing on sins that may not even be his, carrying the weight so someone else stays spotless. Eliza visits the station hours later, wrapped in a scarf too big for her frame. She begs for a moment, insists Victor isn't the man. He might be guilty of half the city's corruption, she whispers, but not this. He had reasons to hate him, yes, but not reasons to kill him. You study her face. Her words aren't rehearsed. They tumble out like stones tripping down a hill. And you realize, with a sinking gut, that you've cornered the wrong man. Back in the squad car, you mutter, "We're chasing shadows." Harlan rubs his temples. Tell me about it. You think we're puppets? Not just puppets. The killers pulling every string. They wanted Victor here. They wanted us distracted. It feels like you've stumbled into a shell game, eyes darting while the P disappears. The killer's hand is faster than yours, and the crowd is laughing because they already know the outcome. Historians still argue whether Napoleon died of stomach cancer or was slowly poisoned with arsenic while in exile, wrong diagnosis, or secret murder. You can almost imagine, centuries later, scholars picking apart your case, debating whether Victor was a villain, a pawn, or both. That night, your notebook fills with crossed-out theories. The spiral map still stares, mocking you. You circle the theater again, add Victor's name to the margin, then scratch it out so hard the paper tears. Somewhere in the mess, the real killer watches you chase the wrong lead and laughs. When you finally collapse on the couch, you dream of cuffs snapping shut not around the guilty, but around you. And in the dream, Victor's calm eyes glow in the dark, whispering, "Too late." You wake with a jolt, sweat slicking your neck, and realize the sick truth. The city just gave you the wrong suspect, neatly wrapped, because it's easier to sleep when anyone sits behind bars. But you know better. The killer's still out there waiting for curtain call. And you're the fool who applauded too early. The air tastes different after you realize you've chased the wrong man. Coffee goes sour, bread turns chalky, and even the breeze through your window feels stale, like someone swapped out the city for a wax imitation. You stare at the empty space where Victor sat in interrogation, and the thought won't leave you. He's guilty of plenty, but not this. Which means the real killer is still strolling alleys, smiling at your frustration. You turn to the notebook again, its pages heavy with water damage, but not unreadable. The spiral map glares from one page, and lists of names scatter across others. Not random. Eliza was right. Each name ties back to that crumbling theater. You dig deeper into company records, old financial sheets no one wanted to archive. And there it is, money funneled off the books, property deeds shuffled like cards, debts recorded in shaky handwriting. Greed, the oldest motive in the catalog. But then another layer emerges, scribbled in margins, initials beside certain transactions. And in the middle of one list, a heart drawn in ink so faint you almost miss it. Love mixed with numbers. Now that's dangerous chemistry. Mainstream historical fact. In the 1920s, the Teapot Dome scandal shook the United States when government officials secretly leased oil reserves for bribes. It was greed at its greasiest, and it taught the world that wealth and power will always share a bed. Looking at the notebook, you feel the same slimy fingerprints, only this time with a personal twist. Eliza meets you again, this time in a cafe so dim the waitress has to squint at her own notepad. She leans across the table, whispering. He was protecting someone, a lover, maybe, someone tied up in all those deals. If the truth came out, it would ruin them. You swirl your spoon in lukewarm tea, and ruin him, too. Her eyes shine with something close to pity. He thought keeping promises was enough. But promises don't hold up in this city. That line hits you harder than it should. Promises, fragile as paper, heavy as chains. You remember the broken watch, the moment it stopped, and wonder if that was the instant his promises broke too. Quirky tidbit. Did you know some ancient Romans believed tying a knot in a lover's belt could keep them faithful? People literally trusted a piece of string to hold hearts in place. Cute, but useless. Promises in your case feel the same knots, tied too loosely, slipping apart under strain. Back at your desk, you map out motives. Greed, yes, but also love, and deeper still, revenge. Old grudges hidden in those faded letters Eliza found tucked in the margins. Someone scorned, someone cut out of the deals, someone left behind in the spiral of names. You can almost hear their resentment dripping off the page. Harlan barges in, waving a folder. Got something for you. Bank records. Someone's been moving cash overseas, same week as the murder. Guess whose initials pop up? He slaps the folder down. Not Victor's, not Eliza's. Someone you barely noticed before, a secondary name scribbled in the notebook, hidden between larger signatures. The kind of person you'd overlook at a party, but who watches everything from the edges. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra ended her life with a snake bite or poison hidden in a vial. Passionate suicide or cold calculation. Motives blur as easily as facts. Your case feels the same. Was it about money, or about love gone sour, or just the sweet taste of revenge? You don't know yet, but you can feel the answer pressing closer. You decide to test the theory. A visit to the theater at night, alone, no backup. because apparently you've decided survival instincts are optional. The building sighs as you step inside, dust swirling like smoke. The stage creaks, curtains rot, and somewhere above, pigeons shuffle in the rafters. You light your flashlight and sweep it across the seats. There, taped under the armrest of a chair, you find another scrap of the notebook. Torn edge, same handwriting. It lists dates, meetings, trades, rendezvous, and the last date is the night of the murder. Next to it, a single word, broken. You stand frozen, the sound of your breath too loud. Broken promises, broken trust, broken lives. And now, maybe, broken justice if you don't get this right. Back outside, the city hums with late-night neon. You lean against a lamppost and let the clues wash over you. Someone used greed as camouflage, love as bait, and revenge as the blade. It's almost elegant if you ignore the corpse at the center. Quieter now, you realize something else. This isn't just about solving a case. It's about peeling back the layers of the city itself. Every motive buried here belongs to someone still breathing, still smiling, still sipping coffee on street corners while you sweat under the weight of their secrets. And the killer, they're not running. They don't have to. They've already tied you into the spiral, and you're following it step by step, closer to the center. The wrong suspect sits behind bars, probably sipping better coffee than yours. The real one, out there, somewhere, watching the web tighten. And you can't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, you're not solving their puzzle. You're performing in it. The storm breaks that night without warning, thunder rattling the window panes, rain strafing the city like thrown gravel. You pace the apartment, restless, knowing the spiral has wound too tight to ignore. The torn scrap from the theater lies on your desk, its single word staring up at you like an accusation, broken. You've had enough. You grab your coat, flashlight, and the battered notebook, and step into the storm. The city glistens under rain, every street lamp haloed, every alley darker than usual. Somewhere out there, the killer waits, and you're done letting them script the play. Tonight, you flip the script. The map leads you back to the theater. Again, of course it does. The spiral always pointed here, and deep down, you knew the center was never just a place. It was a trap. But you walk in anyway, water dripping from your sleeves, boots slapping against warped wood. The air tastes metallic, sharp with mildew and electricity. A figure stands on stage, waiting. Not Victor, not Eliza, someone quieter, overlooked. The person from the margins of the notebook. Their silhouette sharpens under your flashlight beam. You finally got here, they say, voice steady. You lift the notebook. You left enough breadcrumbs. They smile faintly. I didn't leave them for you. I left them for him. He was supposed to find them, to understand what promises cost. But he burned too much. And then, well, they spread their hands, rainwater dripping from their coat. Harlan bursts in through a side door, gun raised, but you motion him back. This isn't about bullets, yet it's about answers. Mainstream historical fact. In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was stabbed by his closest allies. Historians still argue whether Brutus acted out of patriotic duty or personal betrayal. Standing here now, you can taste that same tension, greed or love, loyalty or vengeance. Which motive pushed the knife? The figure steps forward. He ruined me. Years of work, stolen deals, whispers to investors, until my name meant nothing. And then he flaunted that scarf, that watch, those promises he couldn't keep. He thought I'd just disappear quietly. Your flashlight flickers, so you made sure he disappeared instead. Their jaw tightens. He was never supposed to die in that alley. I only meant to frighten him, to make him admit what he'd done. But promises are brittle. He fell, he bled, and in that moment, I realized the city would never blame me. They'd blame Victor, or anyone else, because I was no one. Harlan curses under his breath. We cuffed the wrong man. The killer laughs softly, almost sadly. You always do. People like me don't fit the picture of a murderer. We're background characters, forgettable, invisible, until it's too late. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval courts believed animals could stand trial for crimes. Pigs, goats, even roosters were dressed in little outfits and sentenced for their supposed misdeeds. Silly, but revealing. Society will blame anything, anyone, if it means order feels restored. Tonight, Victor was the pig in a wig, condemned, while the real culprit stayed hidden. Lightning slashes through a hole in the roof, illuminating the scene. You see the truth in their eyes, not madness, but exhaustion. The spiral wasn't just a map of corruption. It was their plan, their obsession, their way of proving the city could be twisted into a pattern only they understood. Historians still argue whether the Library of Alexandria burned in a single catastrophic event, or slowly declined through repeated losses. Knowledge lost in layers, truth buried under half-stories. Your case is the same, that truth didn't vanish all at once. It eroded, piece by piece, until only this broken confession remained. You lower the flashlight, voice soft. You think this ends with you invisible. But the city remembers patterns. It remembers names. Tonight, it will remember yours. For the first time, their confidence falters. The storm outside surges, thunder rolling like applause. Harlan steps forward, cuffs ready, but the killer bolts down the stage steps, through the side door, splashing into the rain-slick alleys. You chase. Your boots pound, lungs burn, rain lashes your face. The spiral feels alive now, each turn of the streets dragging you deeper. Shadows blur, neon streaks, and for a moment you lose sight. Then you spot them vaulting a fence, slipping on wet brick. Adrenaline pushes you faster. You corner them in a dead-end alley, their back against graffiti-stained wall. For a second, neither of you move. The rain hammers harder, drowning the city's usual hum. Finally, they sag, breath shuddering. You don't understand, they whisper. This city eats promises. I just proved it. You step closer, cuffs in hand. No, you just became the proof. And when the metal clicks shut, it feels less like victory, more like inevitability. The spiral has closed, the pattern complete, and you're left standing in its center, soaked to the bone, wondering if solving murders means you ever really win or just survive long enough to watch the curtain drop. The city exhales after a storm, streets steaming, gutters carrying away the last of the night's violence. You walk slow, cuffs still heavy in your pocket, boots leaving a trail of rainwater on the station floor. Harlan slumps in a chair, tie undone, muttering that he'll never look at a spiral doodle the same way again. You both laugh, but it's the brittle kind of laugh, cracked around the edges. The killer sits behind glass, silent, staring at nothing. No smugness now, no trembling ether, just stillness. You realize they were right. People like them fade into the wallpaper, until one day they step out, and no one remembers they were there at all. Victor is released with minimal apology. He glares at you, as if you've ruined his favorite tie, but there's relief under the anger. Eliza slips into the station later, scarf still wrapped around her shoulders, eyes full of questions you can't answer. You want to tell her it's over, but that word feels too heavy. Cases don't end. They dissolve into quiet, mainstream historical fact. When World War II officially ended, celebrations erupted worldwide. But some Japanese soldiers, isolated on remote islands, didn't hear the news and kept fighting for decades. Historians still argue whether they clung to loyalty or simply couldn't imagine peace. Looking at your case, you wonder the seminar you finished, or just waiting for the next skirmish. You take one last look at the evidence laid out: the broken watch, the torn scarf, the burned map, props from a play now finished. You slip them back into boxes, lids snapping shut like punctuation. Harlan claps your shoulder. We solved it. Try to remember that, but in your gut, you know solving murders is never about neat endings. It's about survivors picking up the shards, about silence settling where chaos used to shout. Justice is a word people love to repeat, but in the small hours, what you're left with is quieter: exhaustion, reflection, and the fragile luxury of sleep. Quirky tidbit to close. In the 19th century, some people believed photography could steal a piece of your soul. Maybe that's what these cases do: snapshots of lives stolen from everyone who touches them. A fraction gone, click by click. The city outside returns to its rhythm. Traffic hums, neon blinks, pigeons flap across rooftops. You finally walk home, streets washed clean, though you know dirt always finds its way back. You collapse into bed, raincoat still damp, and close your eyes. The spiral unwinds in your dreams, slowly this time, until nothing remains but silence. The wind down begins here, softening, stretching words like a lullaby. You breathe slower, noticing how even the city seems to hush with you. The storm has passed, the chase has ended, and all that remains is quiet. Picture yourself drifting through those empty streets, neon lights dimmed, puddles reflecting nothing but the calm sky above. Every sound that once scratched at your nerves, the footsteps, the whispers, the hiss of rain, has faded into a steady hush, like a fan humming in the background. You've carried heavy clues, tangled motives, and sharp confessions, but now, as the story closes, you can set them down one by one, as if laying stones gently into still water. The ripples widen, then soften, then disappear altogether. Even the spiral loosens its grip. What once pulled you tighter now uncoils into a simple line, stretching out toward rest. You follow it not because you must, but because you can't. Toward comfort, toward peace, toward the weightless space between waking and dreaming. Let your eyes rest, let your breath deepen. You're safe now, wrapped not in shadows or suspicion, but in calm. Whatever mysteries the world still holds can wait for another night. For now, this is your ending, steady, soft, and yours.